Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The SPA in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is intentional living. Amazing people like you share ways to live by design and with purpose to ensure that this short ride of life occurs with choice, physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-giving knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and creating a positive impact through intentional living. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Ken Hannaman, an executive leader in the restaurant industry with the responsibility of 700 plus restaurants. In addition to his corporate responsibilities, he is also an author, writer, and possibility mindset coach. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Diane. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to a great, purposeful conversation with you and the audience, of course.
Well, thank you. You've just taken a concept and a spin in so many different ways. And you have just through your life done a lot of self-internalization and reflection, and you have found a truth. And I'd love for you to share that with the audience here today.
Yeah, the biggest self-internalization truth that I discovered in my own work is that we are obviously in control of our realities, and that a lot of people have labels that affect them and faulty belief systems that are outdated, and hence the term ungraduated. From my point of view, it's really stepping outside and looking at whose life you're really living. Is it one for you, or a lot of pre-programmed beliefs that often with good intentions, but not always, come to us that we are living through somebody else's visions? And it's about what I call doing the work and turning within and doing a lot of that searching for your own purpose, your own reason for being, to define life on your terms and live it your way, not through the lives of others. That's what it's about for me and my continuing journey that I obviously intend to bring to the audience here today and in the work that I do as well too.
I love it. And, I just love how you've just coined the term and branded, and it's also your podcast with Ungraduated. And I'd love for you to talk about, a little bit behind the story about how you came up with that term and how it has impacted your life.
Yeah. So being in the restaurant business for what's been 25 plus years now, I've gotten to a place where I'm pretty happy, could easily become content, but it's not the way that my mind works. I want to have purpose and meaning and legacy. So I could easily just put it on cruise control, but it's just not who I am. So I love teaching. I love coaching. It's what I've done my entire career. And what's next for me really is COO, Chief Operating Officer level type of positions, which are great money, of course, but that connectability to people is where I think things can get disconnected, and it's not where I'm most passionate. So I started thinking about, hey, it's time to take action and do some personal branding, see where things take me and put it out there. All this learning is not good kept within. I think that my story can certainly help others. And that's where this Ungraduated brand really came from. And it really struck me literally as a figurative bolt of lightning, not literally, thankfully, as I was working out one day in my home gym and was thinking, how can I create a brand or a purpose that represents me, as well as what it means to step outside of the normal programming box? And I myself, being a high school dropout and just not really following life in the conventional path, this word came to me. And I talked to my wife. She's always a very true source of reasoning. And when she said, automatically, that's it, it's perfect, I knew I was good. But then the real work began of trying to figure out what to put into the content and writing a book and starting a podcast and creating a website, all things that I had no experience with. But that's the birth of what Ungraduated Living was. And I'm still letting it evolve and seeing what form that it takes to reach the people that might most benefit from it.
Right. I just love how you just went into the unknown, right? And you really looked at what was true for you and how you wanted to live your life. And, it can be challenging when we've got the expectations of people around us, whether it's, our parents, our educators, those things. And sometimes there's like that pressure to stay in that mold. And when you step outside that mold, there can be these fears, and there's some things that can pop up in anything that we do. Can you talk a little bit how you move through fears and how you look at fear?
Yeah. And I know this is obviously a very hot topic button issue for a lot of people. People are starting to realize fear is the greatest limiting factor that we face in life. And we now know this from studying, of course, that we have a base reptilian brain that has this innate ability to fight or flight. And that's what fear was really created from and for, the purpose to survive. Thankfully, for the most part in today's world, we're not running from lions, tigers, and bears, and we don't have to worry about that fight or flight instinct. But that fear level is something that we create now based off of stressors and modern day technologies that exist and cause us to have this fear, this limiting life belief that is fear. And it's about comfort. It's whenever the ego is trying to protect us, that it wants to hold us safe. And it has a lot of great purpose, back to my earlier points, but in today's world, we allow it to control us. So for me, it's really paying attention to what are my fears. And any listener, we all have different ones. And there's, of course, fear of heights and fear of spiders and snakes, but I'm talking mostly about the fear of public speaking, the fear of taking some big steps, the fear of not living into, or what happen if you don't take these steps to live into your fullest potential. And people get complacent and comfortable. And that's a natural human characteristic. So for me, it's about watching and paying attention to what fears I have, because it's a cue for me to lean more into those and study them, understand where it's coming from, and deal with that deep psyche, subconscious level of programming that we all have that's, again, meant to keep us safe, but will paralyze us if we don't address them. So for me, it's just really stepping back and pausing to be aware of what that fear is so that I can then do the work to address it, unveil it, and then, of course, conquer it and move past it to never have it be a limiting factor again.
Right. Well, that's just another great example of being ungraduated, right? Where most people are like running away from it. When you're leaning into it and seeing what's there for you, I mean, that can be some of our greatest lessons. And if anything, we've seen that particularly over the last several years where, when there were shutdowns and people went into this crazy fear mode of thinking like they had no control over their lives. And I think that it was a really great opportunity, especially now on the other side of it, for people to look at going, what was that, right? Like, what was it for me? And what was it for, how we decide to do life, right? And how we can lean into things and going, okay, are we just going to believe things that other people are saying to us? Or are we going to see what's actually true for us and then be able to make some decisions about how you want to live your life? And so I love this kind of self-reflection and this really looking at what's behind certain things. So, to be able to look into that, I think is such a big deal. And that's just one example of things that have happened here in the world. A lot of times people see like you're, going through a very successful part of your life, but, things weren't always easy, right? Things weren't always, clear in what those things were. I'd love for you to share just some kind of disempowering times when you were out of alignment, when things weren't working for you, and what did you do to kind of move through that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And again, not to continue to beat it fully here as a dead horse, but this fear aspect is a control mechanism. So to your point, it doesn't matter what it is. The psyche of a human being is absolutely controlled through fear. So it's something we have to be very mindful of and constantly aware of. Not that we shouldn't pay attention to, or that we should just run face first into whatever that it is out there, but it's doing the research for yourself. And that's, I think, the most important point to what you just make is that not everything is a blanket statement, and not everything is going to always apply to you. And that's always key for any listener to realize. Just pause. But for me, to your question here, I think it's very important to realize that I've been doing a process, and I wasn't, as many people listening probably are who are like me, who speak on things. I didn't come out of the womb here perfected. None of us are. It's this thing called life that is a learning if we pay attention to it. I had a ton of anxiety, a lot of stress, and was putting it on myself in ways that I had no control over, really. But we allow titles and labels and status to affect us in certain ways that can be very detrimental to us. And for me, as I was in a position years ago at the age of 25, 42 now, I put a ton of stress on myself work-wise that was weighing on my health. I was starting to have panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I went to the doctors and had them look at my heart because I was thinking I was having heart attacks, like mini strokes. And I actually did have a mini stroke. It got so bad where I actually lost temporary sight in one of my eyes and couldn't speak. And it had all the classic stroke symbols at the age of 25 while I was at work. And I had to really, at that point, start to reflect. 25 years old, too young to be having problems like that. How is this happening? And of course, the natural instinct as well. Could it be genetic? While I believe some of that stuff impacts us, there is neuroplasticity, there is epigenetics, things that we do to ourselves that can change the outcomes of these issues. So a lot of it is internally with the mindset and doing that kind of work. But I had to begin to peel back all those layers that I was placing on myself, realize I have a great team around me, do my job, let the people, of course, that work for me do their job, and let the cards fall where they may. And of course, since then, health-wise, it's great. The doctor's visits that I go to say that I have the best levels of cholesterol and overall health that they've seen in a long time. So a lot of things can be controlled. Don't allow yourself to fall victim to that belief that you just have these problems. A lot of it, I hate to say, is generated through our own thoughts and everyday actions and lifestyles that we are creating for ourselves. So that's some things I've had to work through that I've since changed. But again, the person speaking to you right now and for your audience was not the same person at 25. Thankfully, I've done that work and got a lot better as I approach 30 and 35 and 40, and will continue to always evolve and keep looking for more ways to improve as I gain more knowledge and, of course, take the action to practice upon it.
Absolutely. Well, and that's such great insight and a great thing for our listeners to reflect upon about what's going on in your life right now that feels like it's out of control. But if you ask the deeper questions, if you really look into that, you can go like, what part did I play in this? Right. And a lot of times, I think it's unpopular to take that 100% responsibility because it's so easy to blame, lots of things. But when we really look at it, it's like we control what we put in our mouth. We control how we think about things. Even though their things can be stressful, it's like, what are the things are we doing to mitigate that? What kind of recovery are we doing that allow ourselves to actually take control of our health, to actually play a positive role in that? So I think it's a really important conversation. And I love that you're really bringing this up about people really asking those deeper questions and not just blanketly believing things that people are being told, and to take that responsibility. And as you say, to your point, is to do the work. And so what would be some of that doing the work? Like, what were some of the things that you did to get in alignment to really get to where you are today?
First things first, live in the present moment. We are so accustomed to what happened in the past, what's coming in the future, which was a lot of what my stress and anxiety was. And for most people, that's exactly what it is. It's not being focused on what you have control over and what you don't. And of course, being okay with letting the cards again fall where they may, once you can put your head down at night and realize that you are in control of these outcomes. And if something crazy happens, guess what? You still have a choice in how you respond. You don't have to do anything. You can choose to do nothing or take a lot of action. So for me, it was that reading of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now was probably one of the more powerful books that I read that talked about the ego and the constant monkey mind of being in the future tense and the past. And again, life only occurs ever presently. And when you can really slow things down and understand that concept, it's a very empowering way to live. And it taught me again that I can control my future by what I do right now. If I want to sit on my hands and be lazy, well, then I'm going to reap those outcomes for better or for worse in the future. Once you begin to understand that present moment awareness, yes, meditation helps. Not 100% essential, I don't think. I think just being aware that pausing from time to time with some stillness. Could be 5 minutes in the beginning of your day or the end of your day. Just pausing the mind and then filling that gap with some gratitude, some compassion, some love for yourself, some grace for yourself. And as you begin to frame up that, hey, for me to be at my best and serve others, I have to take care of me. Exercising every day is something that I've made a part of my continual routine now. No day starts for me without at least 45 minutes of some kind of activity. Could be a run, could be a jog, could be a walk, but there's something physical that I do that gets the blood flowing, helps with the thinking, helps with the calming. I get outside whenever I possibly can. Not all of this stuff works perfectly for everyone, but you got to find what works for you. Find a space in your home that you enjoy, or find a space that you can create that would be your space. Find an activity that you enjoy doing and tie some kind of workout to it. And then really it's about your diet, what you put in your mouth. We are products of. This is a biochemical reaction that takes place within the body as we eat. So we have to realize what we feed ourselves and drink matters. And I'm far from perfect. We're here to live life and enjoy it as well too. So I don't have a perfect diet, but I am aware of doing too much and indulging. I certainly partake and enjoy what we're here to do, which is live. But a lot of these things people have to realize slowly add up. And that's the problem with humanity, is that we're a right now society. We think the changes that we make now will automatically, and they do happen, but this idea of like tomorrow or next week that we're going to see changes, things happen slowly in the physical life. And that's just what you have to realize. But every choice that you make makes such a huge impact, positively or more detrimentally, in your life. So those are just a few things. Again, find what works for you. But there is a lot of studies and known truths about the benefits of present moment awareness, of making time and stillness in your mind, watching what you eat, and just taking some exercise. Those 4 things alone will make a ton of change for you. A few weeks, a month, a year from now, you'll be a whole new person, because your body it will rewire itself as you make these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. I mean, we definitely are an instant gratification society, where it's like, if it hasn't shown us results within, 24 hours or over the weekend, people get discouraged. And it's really interesting, because to get to where you presently are in your health, it didn't take you overnight, right? It's something that took you over years, sometimes decades, to get to where you're at. And so, one of my friends referred to that as body debt. Like, whatever you did in your life, like that's a body debt that you incurred. And so you have to do the work to be able to turn those things around. And when you're consistent with those things, you can really start seeing a difference and having the kind of impact that you want to have. And you touched on some of the things that we get to see, like having just clarity, right? I mean, be able to focus, and, taking care of your body and what you put in it and how you exercise it, and, how you think about things, affecting stress, make a world of difference on how our outlook of life is, of how we approach things, and what that can actually be. So I'd love for you to talk about, what are the natural law principles, and how does that affect us getting more of what we want and less of what we don't want?
Great question. I love that you asked it. It is absolutely one of the probably lesser known things about life that I've studied and gotten into. And these 7 natural law principles, they're a lot like gravity. You've heard of gravity. Of course, all of the listeners know of gravity, but it's really about how life in the physical reality of which we exist today here, called Earth and life, works. You have this principle of mentalism, where all things begin with thought. Whether they're acted on or not, you are going to take action off of those thoughts, or you are going to program or unprogram your self-conscious. But the fact is, everything in this life begins with a thought. Now, that thought might be from somebody else that impacts you, but you do have control over your own thoughts. And that's how things manifest and materialize in life, out of thought. Then you have the principle of correspondence, where it's sort of a as above, so below, as within, so without, meaning that all things are happening in different places at different times. There's a correspondence to life. Once you think it and take action on it, you're going to have a response to it. And then I won't go in depth with all of these, but you have cause and effect. For every decision that you make, there is going to be an outcome based off of that, or for whatever decision that you do not make. There is the principle of polarity, that basically says, hey, in this world, all things are on a scale. And what I mean by this is, think about temperature. For everybody, this is going to be a different answer to a question. What is cold? What is hot? If you think about that, there is a range of possible outcomes where somebody might say the perfect temperature is 72. That's obviously in Fahrenheit, but if you like a little cooler, you were going to say 68. Maybe 75 is your perfect temperature. But this polarity means all things happen on a scale, and it's in constant flux. And in that flux is the principle of rhythm that basically says there's going to be an ebb and a flow in life constantly. Nothing is going to ever be on a constant high, and nothing should be on a constant low unless you're choosing to make it that way. So I describe it as trying to live in the middle. You want to be the observer of the pendulum swing, not going for a ride on the pendulum swing, which so many of us do. So it's about, again, stepping back, analyzing what's occurring, and realizing if this is affecting you or not. If you're in the middle, you're going to be more balanced. And with that, you have the principle of gender. All things masculine and feminine are within us. As a male, I have feminine characteristics. As a female, you may have more male characteristics. It's a lot of thoughts, it's emotions, and the idea is to know and to lean into your masculine times of doing and taking action, or when to be more creative and more caring, with your feminine side. This idea that every male or female should be a certain way is just not correct, in my opinion. We all have these different aspects within us. So those are just a few examples of the 7 and trying to peel them apart to understanding this is how the physical life works. And science is beginning to prove this a lot too. But this comes from the teachings of the Kabbalah as far as the Kabbalistic beliefs. So in Kabbalah, it's really a Jewish tradition that goes back to ancient Egyptian times. So it's studied and well proven if you take some time to understand these principles and then be aware of them so that you know that your life can have positive or negative impacts as you understand how this life works. So Kabbalistic teachings of the Kabbalah and the Kybalion is a book that this all comes from. It's just one more reading of my studies that I've taken and said, this makes sense to me. And I've applied them in my life and have worked on them to try to be in balance and aware of those 7 things that are continuously occurring in life.
Nice. It's so good. It's interesting that, there is, there's kind of this molding, you will, of these ancient wisdom, whether, even in the Bible, it says as below, as above, so below. And, there's science and, there's just this knowingness that comes, right? And I think we look at it as ancient wisdom. And when we can see the history of it, just even in our own lives, to be able to look at, there's a lot of extreme things that happen around us, but really, when we can get ourselves in the middle of it and not be stuck in it. I love looking at being the observer, right? It's like when we can step outside of any chaotic situation, we can start seeing how things can be polar opposites in so many different ways. But when we step back, we can look at, okay, how can I approach this with, some calmness? Like it's like being able to walk through a storm when it's chaotic, really can show some presence. And it comes back to us being present in the moment, right? To be able to really be aware of what's happening around us at the time really makes a huge difference. And is such a great life skill to be able to cultivate, is to be able to be calm in chaotic situations, to be able to observe what's going on, to be able to decide for yourself how you're going to respond to things versus be in that reactive mode. And so many of these principles allow us to look at things from that deeper perspective.
Yeah. And if I could just real quickly, science, of course, points to the very practical, known, see, feel, touch, taste, smell, and very rarely dives into the other things that they can't see. They're starting to with quantum mechanics and quantum physics, but a lot of this takes a lot of brave work because we are a very wired culture for this time that we live in today that began with what can we see? Science is starting to study what they cannot see and realizing that it overlays with us. So from a practical standpoint, this stuff is real. It just takes science a bit more time to warm up to it, to teach us, but to believe that nothing, or only that everything that you see is real and nothing else exists, is a little bit of a led belief system, which is one of them that I try to teach, is that there is life happening that we cannot see. Energy, of course, is a part of this. We are energy. There's energy in things, and science is starting to show this through a lot of these tests that they're beginning to do with quantum mechanics and quantum physics, but it hasn't always been that way.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting where it seems like it keeps coming full circle where, when we start looking at the unseen, I mean, that comes down to faith, right? That comes down to belief. And it's like, it's interesting it's what we make of that, right? I mean, sometimes people will take things to the extreme, and that's where we get some of these extremist religions, right? And that's where, people have to kind of tear that down and go, okay, what do I actually believe, and what is it that I can have faith in? And you can have a sense of being in the world, right, that is not tied to another person's belief system, right? You can look at that and see what is true for you, and it's so important and I love that things are being uncovered in the world where it's like you don't necessarily see what's happening here. And you do have to have this faith to be able to walk through this world and be able to trust and to know. I think that's part of the difference between knowledge and knowingness, right? We have to trust our knowingness through our own experiences in life and being able to really look at those things and be able to decipher out of that what is true for us. So it's interesting to see where that all goes.
It is. That's the key too, as you said it, is that there's a lot of great studies out there. Of course, the Bible was one of the most well-known books. There's other great teachings that I think overlay and say the same thing, but egoically, humankind has always wanted to say, my view is right, and this is why I believe it. And I'm not here to challenge people's faith. I'm here to just say there's truth in many ways. I have very many loved ones and family members who only believe that one book is the truth of all source, and that's the Bible. If anything else comes to them from outside of it, it might be leading them astray. And those are things to say, hey, if you are searching for truth and you have a higher power belief, could you not also believe that higher power entity, divine source, is also guiding you and giving you information to look at? And again, if you're using fear to say, I don't know if this is going to mislead me, that's another age-old misbelief. And I think that whatever your beliefs are, if you have a higher power belief, that higher power is speaking to you. And it doesn't have to always be in a book from 2,000 years ago. It's one great source, but it's not the only source. So yeah, this egoic need to say, here's what's right, here's what's wrong, do this, don't do that. And when people just autonomously sign up for it, I think that we do ourselves a disservice. We can become better people by exploring all things that help us in life, not just one point of view. So that's my experience and my position on it. And I encourage people to step outside of their comfort zone. The only way to learn is to explore. And if you have a very sound understanding of this, there's no fear or being misled or deceived by the opposite of this divine source entity that exists out there. So that's just some perspective on it.
Right, right. And I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and, right? I think, the Bible has such great foundational things, but why would you limit a God to say everything is right there? I mean, don't you think God could actually have experiences in your life that is actually trying to help you along your path? Like if you start thinking of everything happening for you, aren't these circumstances and things that are set up, is part of our learning in this world, and that there's so many different ways to do that. So I think it's important for people to go, okay, it's right? And that's the expansive being of how it is that we're here and what we get to choose and what we get to create. So speaking of creating, one of the things I always love to ask our guests is that, we live differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. So what is your favorite room in your home and why?
I would say probably my own living room. Actually, my wife does an amazing job of creating a very comfortable, calming space. This time of year, probably more than ever, at the point of this recording, it's almost Christmas. And I love her decorating its soft tones of lights and just a very calming environment. And while I love all aspects of my home, the family room where her and I sit, oftentimes with no television on, maybe throw on some music or just have some good conversation. It is a very calming, peaceful space. After a long day or a week of travel, I love coming home and sitting down on the couch in the family room, no TV on, and just taking in the calmness. I think it's important for all of us to actually pause and find a space. For me, it's my own family room.
I love it. It's so great. And it's so great you mentioned like this, Christmas time of year, this time it's kind of that magical and connection. And I think that's such an important time for people to just, it's, peace on earth, right? We get to create that in our own living room, like just one conversation at a time, and the people that we choose to have around us, and to be able to really have that connection. I think, being able to have, deep conversations like we have today, and being able to share that with other people is really a benefit of our great human experience. So I know that our listeners are going to stay in contact with you, Ken. How can they best do that?
The best way is to go to ungraduated.com. It's one website that, of course, has information on the podcast, on my book as well, too, that came out with some great reviews and people seem to be enjoying it. So I am very happy to get it out there, have folks that, again, want the information to go check it out. But the podcast is there, the book is there, as well as some content and research and writing as well, too, that I'm constantly trying to work on and update. But ungraduated.com is the website. Ungraduated Living is the podcast to check it out if you would like to hear more of these kinds of conversations. And of course, the book is available for all to check out with Kindle, paperback, hardback, as well as Audible.
That is awesome. Well, as you know, Ken, our theme for this season is intentional living. So in what ways are you living an intentional life now?
Well, this conversation wouldn't be happening if it wasn't through very intentful living. And this is something that I care very much passionately about. I have a lot to still figure out on my own, and I'm always searching. But again, I want to plant some seeds for people that have similar thoughts, big question type stuff. And I don't have all the answers, but I'm starting to form more of them and want people to stop and think about why we're here. What is the point of life? Things that maybe not everybody cares to stop and think about. I know we need some practical living out there and some doers, and I'm all about taking the action and doing things too. But again, just asking yourself these deeper questions. And what I put out in content is very much purposefully intended for that type of an audience, is to just stop, listen, figure out how to become the best version of yourself possible, to be the best mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, leader, human being that you can be, which there's no perfect. I'm not perfect, and we're not going to be, but it's a constant exploration of how we evolve consciously to our best selves possible to become the best humans possible, because we are all connected. And this work that I do is what I care and love about. Love my corporate side of my business with the restaurants. I love talking and teaching, do that all the time. And whenever I'm not there, I'm doing stuff like this because it's purposeful, intentful work that I think more people need to do for themselves as well, too.
So great. Well, Ken, thank you so much for your wisdom and for being here with us today.
Can't thank you enough, Diane, for what you do as well, and for having me and your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of our audience, thank you for being here and taking your time to be here with us today. And, take a moment, have some reflection, have some of that deeper thought, step outside and observe what's going on for you. If things aren't, lining up the way you want to, ask yourself some deeper questions and see what it is that you can change and shift. And if you need some support in that, put in some questions, tag both Ken or myself. We're happy to help you along that journey. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.